Hi, it's Leo back again with another video, and today we're going to be taking a look at this device here, the Samsung Galaxy A26. Released earlier this year for £300 as one of Samsung's more budget-friendly offerings, and after previously reviewing the A07 and A17 on this channel, it only makes sense that we take a look at the A26. So anyway, in this video we're going to take a closer look at the Galaxy A26. We're going to unbox it, take a look at its design and features, test out the cameras, performance and battery life, and I'm going to give you my overall opinion on the device to help you decide if it's worth spending your money. So here it is, the Galaxy A26 5G in pink. You can also get this phone in white, black and light green, but I decided to go for the pink version just to spice things up a little bit. The packaging is very basic, it's just cardboard and it says Galaxy A26 5G on the side. It is actually very similar to the box of the A16. Let's use our trusted graphics card to try and get into the box. I always seem to struggle with these tabs on these A phones. They're definitely not the most satisfying box to open. There we go. All right, let's take the top off. Well, as easy as that. So here is the phone. I'm going to put that to the side for the minute and have a look what else is in the box. There's literally nothing else in the box. You sure about that? Oh, it's stuck to the top. We'll get there eventually. So the same as literally every other A phone I've unboxed, we have a SIM card ejection tool. I probably have hundreds of these now. And then if we open up this pouch, what do we have? A USB-C cable, always useful, and a quick start guide. Nice. Let's take a look at the phone itself. It comes in this paper protection. I think you have to open up this tab on the side, like so. Then the phone should just fall out. Here it is, the Galaxy A26. So we're going to start off by taking a look at the design of this device, which is actually pretty interesting. So being a budget device, there are a lot of budget materials, but with a price tag of £300, it's creeping its way into being a mid-ranger. So you'll find the odd premium material here and there. For example, the edges, like the A17, are made out of plastic, but unlike the A17, the A26 now has a glass back, which does make the whole device feel more premium. I got this A26 in this salmon pink, which I thought was quite interesting. It's not personally to my taste, but I thought it was quite unique. I don't usually see phones in this colour. So as mentioned, the back of this device is now made from glass, but it's no ordinary glass, it's Gorilla Glass Victus Plus. So it should survive a couple of drops, and it does make the device feel more premium in the hand when compared to its younger brother, the A17. There's something about cold glass in the hand, it just feels more expensive. And the A26 is a couple of grams heavier, which helps with the illusion of being more premium. The only downside I can see with this glass back is it's more of a fingerprint magnet.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine.
Moving around to the edges of this device, which are still made of plastic. On the right hand side we have a volume rocker and a power button which doubles up as a fingerprint reader. And from my testing it's been fairly fast and accurate. I believe it's the same one you get in the A17 and A16 and A07. They've all got the same fingerprint reader. In fact, you have to go all the way up to the A50 series to get an in-screen fingerprint reader, which apparently is more desirable. Moving over to the left side of the device, like every other A phone we've reviewed on the channel, we have a dual SIM card slot where you can choose between dual SIM or a SIM card and a micro SD card for storage expansion. Moving down to the bottom of the device, we no longer have a headphone jack. There's a USB-C for charging and data transfer, and there's two microphone holes, which is interesting because if you take a look at my A16 and A17, they've both only got one, so maybe this device has better microphones. This is a microphone test of the Galaxy A26. Is it any good? And there's also only a single bottom firing speaker, which sounds like this. I've been playing some Battlefield 6, which I've been using to test out this controller, and in this game the sticks felt accurate and responsive. Now moving over to the D-pad, this is where games have made. It can get decently loud but sounds tinny and distorted at higher volumes, and when gaming or consuming media in landscape it can be covered very easily. One area that has been upgraded from the A25 is the weather sealing. The The A25 had no such certification. This is now IP67 water and dust resistant, which means you should be fine taking it outside in a stormy day like today. This is proper wet. The things I do for YouTube. Technically, it should even be fine being submerged in up to a metre of water, but I'm not going to test that. Turning over to the front of the device, the display is actually an area where there have been some improvements, especially when compared to lower tier devices and the A25 from last year. So in terms of dimensions, it's actually identical to the A17. It's a 6.7 inch 1080p AMOLED display, which sounds pretty good, but instead of being 90Hz like on the lower tier devices, it's a full 120Hz. This means that scrolling and navigating the user interface should feel smoother. And the display being 6.7 inches is actually 0.2 inches larger than last year's A25. And a larger screen and smaller bezels is always better. Although having smaller bezels than last year's A25, it still retains the camera notch and larger chin, which keeps this phone looking more like a budget device, in my opinion. Saying that, functionally speaking, I don't have any issues with the camera notch. It's not like I'm going to be using that tiny slither of screen real estate above the dynamic island for anything useful. So personally, I don't care if it's a notch or a dynamic island. They both get in the way when you're trying to watch landscape content. So the screen panel itself is good. It comes with all the benefits of AMOLED, vibrant colours, inky blacks, instant pixel response time, so no ghosting or image trailing, which can plague IPS displays, especially in winter. And although this phone can't display HDR content, it can get fairly bright with a peak brightness of 800 nits with auto brightness enabled. The peak brightness on this A26 is interestingly dimmer than last year's A25 that had a peak brightness of 1000 nits. This one only 800 nits. That, along with the headphone jack, might be a reason to hang on to your A25. Whoa, just a quick interruption. If you are enjoying, be sure to drop us a like and consider subscribing. We're trying to reach 14,000 subscribers before Christmas, so help a bro out, you know you want to do it. And it turns out that 98% of my viewers are not subscribers. So if you are enjoying this video, you know what to do. And have a Merry Christmas. It is only the 1st of December when filming this, so it might be a bit early. Anyway, let's get on with the video. So we're now going to take a look at the specs and performance of this device. So like many Samsung devices, there can be a lot of variation in terms of specs within the same model. For example, the A26 can be equipped with either 4, 6 or 8 gigabytes of RAM. This A26 here is middle of the road. It has 6 gigabytes of RAM and 128 gigs of storage, just for reference when we do the benchmarks in a minute. Now annoyingly, there's even variation when it comes to the chipset, with most devices coming with the Exynos 1380, but depending on the region, some A26s come with the older Exynos 1280, which performs about 20% worse. The version of the phone I have here fortunately comes with the Exynos 1380, which is a 5nm octa-core processor, which in Geekbench 6 scored 1014 single core and 2933 multi-core. When put against the Exynos 1330 found in the A17, the single core score is only about 5% better, but the multi-core score is almost 30% better, which is quite impressive. So in benchmarks, this chipset is definitely an upgrade, but the question is, how does it perform in the real world? To do that, we need to test out some games. So the first game I decided to test out was Minecraft, which ran perfectly. It felt like this game was taking advantage of the full 120Hz refresh rate. Granted, I wasn't playing on the highest settings with the furthest render distance, but it did still look pretty good. And I only noticed the occasional stutter when loading in new chunks. So yes, Minecraft is definitely playable on this device. The next game that I decided to test was Asphalt Legends, which is a fairly demanding arcade racing game. And as you can see from the FPS overlay, this game is unfortunately locked to 30 FPS. But with the settings left on default, the phone does manage to maintain 30 FPS pretty well with only the occasional drop. And the game still felt playable and fairly responsive. I then jumped into Call of Duty Mobile, which ran really well. It's just a bit disappointing that this game isn't taking advantage of the high refresh rate screen. The game appears to be capped at 60 FPS. In terms of the general day-to-day speed of this phone, it's pretty good. Opening apps is fairly fast, and even with only 6 GB of RAM, a lot of apps do stay open in the background. So activities like browsing the web, scrolling through YouTube are completely fine on this device. For a budget device, the performance is more than adequate, and compared to the A17, which is the lower tier device, I have actually noticed a difference in performance. This does feel slightly quicker and is able to handle a bit more before becoming overwhelmed and laggy. So we're next going to talk about the camera system on this device because it is quite interesting. So the main camera on the Galaxy A26 is a 50 megapixel shooter, and it's actually the same 50 megapixel sensor that's on the A17, the A16 and the A07, and probably a whole load of other Samsung phones. This sensor is fine, as I've said in my other reviews. It takes good images in good lighting conditions. The images look sharp with decent dynamic range in colours. They have that typical Samsung look to them, vibrant with maybe a little bit too much sharpening. Unfortunately, in less than ideal lighting conditions like today, it's very cloudy. The images very quickly start to look grainy and smeary as the post-processing tries to fight away the grain. This is likely down to the camera sensor being quite small. And another area where the small sensor is apparent is in bokeh, where this phone produces a much wider depth of field when compared to something like an iPhone. So you're much less likely to get a naturally blurry background in photographs. But on the upside, the portrait mode is pretty good, with fairly accurate edge detection, so you can create that artificial bokeh if you want to. Moving down, we have an upgraded ultra-wide camera. This is an 8 megapixel sensor, whereas the A17 and all the phones below it only have a 5 megapixel ultra-wide. And from my testing, it's a fairly solid ultra-wide. For a budget to mid-range device, the image quality is better than expected. There is some distortion around the edges, but the overall quality and level of detail is good. Now the final camera on the back is the most controversial. It's a 2 megapixel macro shooter with fixed focus, the same camera that was included on the A17, and in my review of that phone I really didn't like that sensor. It felt like Samsung just went and found the cheapest camera they could get their hands on and stuck it on the back of that phone just to say that it was a triple camera phone to make it look more premium. And with this A26, my opinion is still very much the same. This is a pointless camera, but the whole situation is probably a bit worse because this phone is more expensive. They could have at least justified something like a 2x telephoto lens. That would have been better than this. You can tell Samsung don't really want you to use this camera because they hide it away as the 7th option under More in the camera app. And the images from this sensor look really bad. Not only are they low resolution at 2 megapixels, the colours are very dull. It's also really hard to get focus because there's no focus mechanism in the lens. You have to physically move the phone backwards and forwards to get focus. And I don't think I've ever got a good image from this sensor on any of their phones. So please get rid of it, Samsung, just some advice. On a more positive note, this phone can now shoot video at 4K with optical image stabilization. Its younger brother, the A17, can only shoot up to 1080p, and for the most part the video quality looks pretty good. It's sharp with decent dynamic range. On the front of the phone there's a 13 megapixel selfie camera, which can take some pretty decent photos. The photos look sharp with good colours, I've got no complaints here, a solid selfie camera. So I now just want to talk about the battery life. So this has a 5000 mAh battery. This appears to be the same 5000 mAh battery that Samsung are putting in all their A phones. And in their lower tier devices, I've praised the battery for lasting more than a day. For example, in the A07, I would say that device has a day and a half battery life, but that's probably because that phone has a lower resolution screen and lower power chip. But when we get to the A26, this phone still has that 5000 mAh battery, but this phone has a more powerful chip and a higher refresh rate screen. So that 5000 mAh battery that lasts a day and a half in the A07 only lasts a single day in the A26. So don't get me wrong, the battery life in the A26 is acceptable, but it's nothing groundbreaking. This will probably last you a whole day and not a whole lot more. The chipset in this phone does appear to use more power than the lower tier devices, especially when gaming. I have noticed on occasion that this phone does warm up slightly more than those phones. And even though this phone has a glass back, it does not support wireless charging. It only supports wired charging up to 25 watts, which should take the battery from 0 to 100% in about an hour and a half. So finally, I want to touch on the software. So currently this phone is running One UI 8, on top of Android 16, which I believe is like the most up-to-date Android. But with these A phones, Samsung does promise 6 years of software support. So this phone should be receiving updates until 2031, which is pretty good. So what are my thoughts on the Galaxy A26? What are the pros? What are the cons? So this phone released earlier this year, and the question is, should you buy one? So the first pro is probably the price. So when this first came out, it was £300, which is, I'd probably say, a little bit too expensive. But I only paid £150 for this phone brand new on eBay. And for £150, you're getting a lot of phone. It's a semi-premium design with a glass back, 6 years of software support, triple camera. I mean, 2 of them are actually usable. But the main selling point for me is actually the screen. So it's a 6.7-inch AMOLED, 120Hz. Pretty high-end specs for a budget device, and it looks really good. And holding it next to my iPhone screen, I don't think there's a huge difference. This obviously gets a little bit brighter, but in terms of smoothness and responsiveness, there's not much in it. This also comes with an upgraded processor when compared to the lower tier device, the A17. And this scores 30% better in multi-core, which is actually pretty impressive. And in day-to-day usage, this phone does feel more responsive. So I would say if you can find this for £150, it is a solid package with good software support, a decent main camera, a good screen, good battery life. It is a solid budget/mid-range device. So what are the negatives? The first thing that springs to mind is the speaker. So it's got a single bottom firing speaker that sounds pretty average, tinny and distorted at lower volumes, and very easy to cover up. Definitely a budget speaker. Another negative is the camera setup. So the main shooter and the ultra wide are solid, but it's that 2 megapixel macro shooter, which is completely pointless. And I feel like there are other phones at this price range that come with telephoto lenses, so it would have been nice if they could put one of those in here. I can't think of any other big negatives. It's just a combination of some small things. So this phone has quite a large chin bezel, which does make it look more like a budget device. The edges of this device are made of plastic and dent very easily. I found out the hard way, so this is my A16. This also has very similar plastic edges, and I dropped it from about waist height, and there are some massive dents in the bodywork. So if you get this phone, I'd advise putting a case on it. Be safe. And this phone doesn't have wireless charging or fast charging, which you see in other budget devices. So anyway, that's going to wrap up this video on the Galaxy A26. Let me know what you think of this device in the comment section below. And if you have enjoyed this video, drop us a like and consider subscribing. We're trying to hit 14,000 subscribers before Christmas. And let me know in the comment section below which smartphone you want me to review next. And I'll see everyone in my next video.